In the last video, you learned how to make your own sentences using the tion-cion cognate trick, plus the formula quiero plus infinitive. I want to do something, right? We're just dropping in our unconjugated verbs. So in this video, we're going to be working more with that formula, and I'm going to give you another one. And I'm also going to give you an overview of Spanish verbs. And as part of that, I'll be explaining this whole tense mood thing because, well, that confuses people, right? I'm going to kick this thing off by giving you another formula that you can just pop your infinitives into, and we're going to keep working with querer, but we want to be able to have a conversation, right? We just don't want to talk about what I want all the time. That just sounds selfish. Tú quieres. Tú quieres. Now, there are two forms of you in Spanish. There is an informal you, which is this one, tú. And there's a formal one, usted. Now, as you can probably imagine, the informal, tú, is used when speaking with friends, family members, peers, children, and others with whom you have a close or informal relationship. The formal version of you, usted, is used with strangers, elders, superiors, or in any situation where a higher level of respect or formality is appropriate. When it comes to deciding whether to use usted and tú, there are some regional differences. For example, in Spain, tú is a lot more common. In Latin America, people are a lot more formal, and you're going to hear usted all the time, even in situations that seem very, well, informal. For example, it's common to use usted in Latin America with parents or older family members as a sign of respect. Now, you're going to be using usted a lot in future lessons and out on the street, especially in Latin America. But for now, we're going to be playing with that informal tú form. And the reason is that it is just much easier to work with. And when you're new to a language, you want to simplify things as much as possible so you can understand concepts. You can understand things like direct and indirect object pronouns, how they work with the verb. It is so much easier with the tú form, so that's what we're going to be working with, all right? Once you know all of these language patterns, it'll be very easy for you to switch to usted whenever you want. All right, let's look at our formulas here. We have two we're working with now. We have yo quiero plus infinitive, I want to do something, and tú quieres plus infinitive, you want to do something. And we're just going to be plugging in things. Now let's make sure you haven't forgotten everything you learned in lesson 2. Go ahead and translate this one. You want to confirm the information. Now you should have come up with something like tú quieres confirmar la información, or perhaps you drop that tú and you just have quieres confirmar la información. Those are both correct. One of the nice things with the tú form is the verb conjugation always tells us that's who we're talking about, so we can always leave off tú. Always leave it off. So we never have to worry if it goes before a verb or after a verb, if we're doing questions. Just makes life easier. That's why we're working with it. Now, we don't usually tell people what they want to do, right? You want to confirm the information. That sounds odd. Sounds some kind of creepy, like, I don't know, some sci-fi movie. So what we really want to do is ask somebody, do you want to confirm the information? That seems more normal, doesn't it? So how do we make these things questions? Well, it is super easy. So let's start with our statement. ¿Quieres confirmar la información? Now we're going to put an upside down question mark in front of it and a regular question mark behind it. And we're going to change our voice inflection to make it sound like a question. ¿Quieres confirmar la información? ¿Quieres confirmar la información? Man, that's pretty easy, right? So let's say you want to answer that question. Translate this one. Yes, I want to confirm the information. Sí, quiero confirmar la información. What if I want to say, no, I don't want to confirm the information? Go ahead. Remember, you should be saying these out loud. No, no quiero confirmar la información. Remember, we use our double no's there when we want to say no to something. The first one's like no, and the other one's more like our don't part. Now let's talk about the word reservation. The good news is that the word reservation does follow the tion-cion cognate trick, and we get reservación, reservación. The bad news is that this word is not used everywhere. A lot of times you're going to see this one instead, reserva. Reserva. And I will tell you that in Spain, you're not going to be using reservación, so stick with reserva. And in Latin America, you'll probably see both. I can tell you that in Mexico, reservación is used. In fact, it appears in what I think is the premier dictionary for Mexican Spanish. El Diccionario del Español de México. They've been around a really long time. All right, let's go ahead and play with reservation a bit, right? Because this fits in so well with what we've been learning. Because we want to talk about, making reservations, canceling them, verifying, confirming. I mean, unless you never go out to eat or travel, then, well, I guess that's on you. So see if you can translate this sentence. Do you want to confirm the reservation? And you can use any translation of reservation you like, all right? Ready? ¿Quieres confirmar la reserva or quieres confirmar la reservación? Either one. Yes, I want to confirm the reservation. Sí, quiero confirmar la reserva or la reservación. Do you want to cancel the reservation? ¿Quieres cancelar la reservación or la reserva? Do you want to make a reservation? You got stuck on that one, huh? Yeah, I don't think have we talked about to make? It is a mega verb in Spanish. It is hacer. And it doesn't fit our cognate trick. Not everything can be a cognate, but this is a verb you're going to be using all the time, so put it on your word list, all right? ¿Quieres hacer una reserva or quieres hacer una reservación? Now that you've seen the pattern, go ahead and translate this one. Yes, I want to make a reservation. Sí, quiero hacer una reserva, or sí, quiero hacer una reservación. Now at this point, we'd probably throw in when we want to make our reservation for, but time expressions, etc. I'm going to put all that into one video so you can refer back to it anytime. Now I know some of you are like, well, that kind of left me hanging there, Paul. Give me something. All right, I'll give you something. The next component we would pop in here would be para, and then whatever our time expression is. That para is for, F-O-R. There are two ways to say for in Spanish, por and para. Para is the one we're going to be using when we're scheduling things. Quiero hacer una reserva para las 5. I want to make a reservation for 5. Or, quiero hacer una reserva para el 5 de marzo. I want to make a reservation for the 5th of March. A las 2 de la tarde. At 2 in the afternoon. Now that video on time expressions is really going to boost your Spanish because it's going to give you a series of patterns that you can just plug in to all the other patterns to just be more specific when things are going to happen. All right, so we've seen here that we're going to have to start working with verbs that don't follow our cognate tricks. Like we're going to have to learn them individually, right? So let's start talking about an overview of how verbs are structured in Spanish. There are 3 types of Spanish verbs. Those that end in AR, those that end in ER, and those that end in IR. And those endings are important because that's going to teach us how to conjugate these. AR verbs are going to have their own conjugations. ER and IR verbs are going to conjugate the same way. That's great, right? Less to memorize. Now, every verb that we've created with our TION-CION cognate trick is an AR verb. Observar, educar, memorizar. See, they all end in AR. Well, obviously there are a lot more AR verbs that are not our cognate tricks, and we're going to have to learn them individually. So here are some common ones if you want to start adding some things to your word list. Hablar, to speak. Trabajar, to work. Estudiar, to study. Now, when you're learning Spanish verbs, it's a good idea to learn their accompanying preposition if that preposition is important. It's used a lot with the verb. And with the verb hablar, to speak, you'll see it a lot with con, which means with, to speak with someone. So it's a good idea to put it that way on your word list. You could have like hablar, to speak, hablar con, to speak with someone, just to remind yourself. Now see if you can translate this sentence using the pattern and seeing this new vocabulary. Do you want to speak with Maria? ¿Quieres hablar con María? ¿Quieres hablar con María? Did you get that one? That's how it works. Once you understand a pattern, you can substitute vocabulary and build out your sentence. How about this one? No, I want to speak with Jose, or I want to talk with Jose. Think of hablar as speak or talk, however it fits in your brain better. No, quiero hablar con Jose. Quiero hablar con Jose. Okay, now sometimes you want to be able to say, do you want to speak with me? Or I want to speak with you. Those are going to be a little unusual in Spanish. So with me is conmigo. And with you, the informal you, it is contigo. So knowing that, how would you translate this sentence? Do you want to speak with me? ¿Quieres hablar conmigo? ¿Quieres hablar conmigo? Yes, I want to speak with you. Sí. Quiero hablar contigo. Quiero hablar contigo. Let's plug some of those verbs into our formulas. Let's look at that one. Trabajar, to work. Do you want to work? ¿Quieres trabajar? And what if you want to say, do you want to work tomorrow? Do you know the word for tomorrow? I mentioned it when we were doing pronunciation, when I did it in ñ, mañana. So you're just going to plug that in. Do you want to work tomorrow? ¿Quieres trabajar mañana? Now you see why that video about time expressions is going to come in so handy. You know, we're not going to push that one off too far. Don't worry. No, I don't want to work tomorrow. No, no quiero trabajar mañana. Let's move on to the next one. Estudiar, to study. This is one you're probably going to be using a lot because, well, you're studying Spanish, right? Do you want to study tomorrow? ¿Quieres estudiar mañana? ¿Quieres estudiar mañana? Did you get that? Are these getting faster? That's how it works, because you're not having to think about the conjugation of that first verb because we're only playing with two of them. What I want, what you want. What I want, what you want. And it's getting faster. So that's enough for AR verbs for now. Let's talk about ER verbs. Querer, to want. We've been playing with that one, haven't we? Comer, to eat. Leer, to read. Aprender, to learn. And one we learned earlier in this lesson, the mega verb hacer, which means to make or to do. You're going to be using that in a lot of different ways in Spanish. You're going to love that verb, all right? So let's play with these verbs a little bit. We're going to start with comer, to eat. How would you ask, do you want to eat? ¿Quieres comer? Not too hard, right? Now, what if we want to ask, what do you want to eat? When do you want to eat? Where do you want to eat? Because when I have a conversation with my wife about eating, those things are all going to come out. How are we going to play with those? Well, let's start to work in some of our question words, okay? So what is going to be qué? Qué. What do you want to eat? I bet you can translate that now that you know qué. What do you want to eat? ¿Qué quieres comer? Let's move on to when. That is cuándo. Cuándo. And it also has an accent mark. When do you want to eat? ¿Cuándo quieres comer? And where? ¿Dónde? ¿Dónde? Plug that one in. Where do you want to eat? ¿Dónde quieres comer? So let's just do them all together, just so they stick in your head. Ready? I'm going to point to you and you belt these things out. What do you want to eat? ¿Qué quieres comer? When do you want to eat? ¿Cuándo quieres comer? Where do you want to eat? ¿Dónde quieres comer? You got this. Let's skip to the verb for to learn. Aprender. What do you want to learn? Try that one. ¿Qué quieres aprender? You just plugged it in. Not too hard, right? ¿Qué quieres aprender? Now, to answer this, you're going to have to learn this verb with a certain preposition that it appears with all the time. This is the formula for your word list. Aprender, a plus infinitive. When you want to say you want to learn how to do something, you're going to need that a. So right on your word list, just put an a in there. See if you can translate this one on your own. If you need to pause the video because it's a bit longer, go ahead and do it. I want to learn how to decorate the house. And I know it's a longer sentence, but break it down. It's just popping our little formulas together. I want to learn how to decorate the house. Quiero aprender a decorar la casa. How about this? Yes, I want to learn to decorate the house. Go ahead. Sí, quiero aprender a decorar la casa. That was faster, right? Because you've already done the math problem. You've already worked it out, so it's coming faster. Let's do a quick one with our mega verb hacer. What do you want to do? ¿Qué quieres hacer? And even more common, at least in my house, what do you want to do today? Now, the word for today is hoy. Now that you just learned that word, you can just plug it in, right? Go ahead. ¿Qué quieres hacer hoy? Let's move on to IR verbs. Here are some common ones. To share, compartir. To obtain or to get, conseguir. To sleep, dormir. Now, take a look at those on the screen. We're just going to plug them in like we always do. Do you want to share the information with me? And remember, with me was a little bit different. ¿Quieres compartir la información conmigo? ¿Quieres compartir la información conmigo? Did you get that? If you did, you're really recognizing these patterns and you're killing it. You're doing a great job. Let's do one more translation before I jump into the next section and we start talking more about how verbs are structured. No, I want to share the information with Miguel. No, quiero compartir la información con Miguel. I'm going to talk a little bit about verb conjugations in Spanish. This is an area of learning the Spanish language that can be very frustrating for students because there are a lot of different tenses and moods in Spanish, and each one is going to have their own set of conjugations. I'm going to explain tenses and moods before the video ends, okay? Take a look at these. These are all of the conjugations in the different tenses and moods for the verb querer, to want. There's a lot of them, right? It can seem very overwhelming at first, and a lot of students are like, I can't learn all this, and they give up. The good news is that you don't have to know all of these conjugations in order to speak Spanish well. I mean, look, you're only dealing with 2 conjugations right now, and then you're using patterns to get around knowing more of the language. And you're making complete sentences, okay? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to be building on your Spanish, showing you how to do conjugations, showing you different tenses and moods, and slowly building your knowledge of Spanish, but in a logical order so you can actually have conversations as you learn. Before I end the video, I just want to talk a little bit about tenses and moods because this gets confusing for folks. I mean, we all know what tenses are, right? Future, present, past. But this word mood can get confusing. So what a mood is that they exist within those tenses, and they kind of change how we're looking at things. The reason this is important in Spanish is because you're going to have different conjugations based on the mood. So there's 3 moods in Spanish: the indicative, the subjunctive, and the imperative. The indicative is when we're just, relating facts, asking questions, things like that. That's what we exist in most of the time. And when you learned quiero and quieres, that's in the present tense in the indicative mood. Now, the subjunctive is a concept that can be very confusing for English speakers because although we do have it in English, it's just not that important. But it is super, super important in Spanish. You'll never be able to speak Spanish well if you don't understand it. Fortunately, I'm going to be breaking it down into a series of simple patterns to remember, so you'll always use it correctly. We're going to get into the subjunctive early on in the course because that's how I teach Spanish. You wouldn't normally learn it so early on in a traditional course, and that's why, well, I don't think traditional courses are awesome. So with the subjunctive, we're going to be using it to express doubt, wishes, commands, desires. For example, today you've been talking about what I want to do and what you want to do, but if I want to say I want you to do something, I'm going to have to know the subjunctive. That's just how it works. Don't worry. You're going to get it, all right? Stick with the course, you're going to get it. Let's move on to the imperative. With the imperative, this is how we're issuing commands to somebody. And this one only exists in the present tense. That's it. The other ones you can have in the different tenses, but the imperative, only the present. Now, I don't know if that explanation really cleared it up for you, but don't worry, I'm going to be simplifying the language, breaking it down into little patterns like the ones I've been showing you, and you're not going to have any trouble with these concepts. A lot of times the explanation of the concept or the area of grammar is more complex than actually using it, I promise you. Well, that's it for this lesson. Make sure you understand these concepts well before moving on to the next lesson because each lesson builds on the ones before. So, I mean, if you don't really understand the concepts, you go to the next one, it's really easy to get lost. All right? Well, I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson when you're ready. And thank you so much for being members of the CERO Spanish crew. Hasta luego.